morning, everyone. My name is Christian. I'm the Strategy and Client Services Director at Abacus. So basically looking after the account managers and that our clients are serviced well throughout all the campaign activities, but also looking at developments like introducing email or other interesting areas that work well together with the Abacus core business. What I want to talk about now is we've heard about the annual trends report, and it is not only interesting on in its own right. It can be linked to each and every business that is in this room, and you can derive certain findings by combining the findings of the annual trends report with what you actually see in your businesses. And over the next 10-15 minutes, I'm going to just give a few examples how this could work and what you can actually take away from applying the annual trends report to your business figures. So how to put the annual trends context in context with your business performance? It's actually quite easy, and I'll show you a few examples. It's either 3 steps or 1. The 3 steps version would be you find the trend chart for your particular category. So if you are in mature clothing, let's say, you find that trend chart and see what your sector has done in 2013 and 2012. You then extract your own revenue figures for the last 2 years if you want to do it yourself, and put that in and overlay that to that trend chart by combining the two actually. But there's an easier way of doing this, because we already hold the data for all the members. Your account manager can actually do it for you. Obviously, you have to be a member of the Abacus Alliance for that, and the data already being loaded to the big database. Because we have all the transactions and all the values, we can do it for you. But I wanted to show you what it can look like and what potential findings you can see quite quickly by combining those two. So this is the mature clothing category chart as it is in the annual trends report. And I just wanted to draw your attention to the month of April, which was a very good month year on year, and revenue grew significantly in that particular month. And on the next slide, I have an example of a client in that category, just to see how we can relate the two. So this is the client, obviously anonymous, and this particular client, when we analyze the revenue, also on an index basis, and that is what the account manager would do for you, to index your own revenue trends throughout those 2 years. Again, looking at the month of April, this particular client in the mature clothing sector actually had a reverse development. Their revenue went down year on year. And that in itself, just looking at the annual trends report, where the category has grown significantly, and then looking at the own figures and realizing, oops, our business hasn't done what the rest of the category has done, that in itself is a first finding and a reason to investigate further. Then this client revenue data can be overlaid with the actual category revenue trends. And it then obviously reveals that this particular client, again drawing your attention to the month of April, is falling behind in this month. But it's not, this particular client is actually falling behind the category in the first half of the year, or in almost from January up until September. So you see that the client revenue index is lower than the category does. And you can see that there could be various reasons to that. It could be the marketing activity that is not comparable with other players in the marketplace. So this particular client is not grabbing enough share of that category and therefore falling behind. Or there could be other reasons to it. But the interesting point is, you need to find out how you're tracking against your own competitive category in order to be aware how your business is performing in relation to your category. So this is another example, another client, but the same principle, to overlay the client revenue or your revenue with the annual trends information. And this graph looks completely different. This client has done extremely well in the later part of the year, has outperformed basically the competitive category in the months of October to December. And then again, we don't know necessarily why that happened, but you, as the business, as the people who steer the business, you should be better placed to interpret that kind of information and take it to the next level. But it's a valid question to ask, okay, why did that business outperform the category in these months? And why was it just tracking with the category in the other months? So it opens up more questions, but without putting the information together in that way, you don't necessarily see it happening. So again, I mentioned that your account manager can provide actually this overlaying of graphs, overlaying of data for you, and then have a discussion around it, what the reasons could be. So you can ask your account manager today to produce that such a combined graph for you, and it's completely free of charge, as the annual trends report is. And as I mentioned, we already have the data for those that contribute to the Abacus Alliance. We will be able to give a few pointers along the way, and there are more detailed reports available if you want to go into more detail. And I'm going to just cover one of those very briefly, just to show you what the next level of detail could be after just combining the annual trends report with your revenue figures. But before I move on, any questions with regards to combining those two kind of streams of data, the annual trends and the client? Fine.
How can you do that if your business has bits and pieces in different sections? Clothing, some gifts.
Yeah, there are ways of categorizing your data by those products. So if you have certain product level information stripped out, you can relate it to the category that those products fall into. So for instance, if you sell clothing and home interior, I think there could be ways of splitting out the data if you have the product level information as well. And then you can relate it to the respective competitive category. Okay? So just to show you what else could be done with this kind of data, one of the reports we sell is the Market Insight report, but it shows you just that next level of detail, and I'm going to give you a few snippets what it looks like. So what is it? It is a comprehensive overview of your business performance in the context of the market potential in the competitive category. So very similar to the whole outset of the annual trends report with looking at those different categories, but in more detail. It contains 4 elements. It gives you market share information, it gives you more details on seasonality, information about the merchandise category you're in, and as a standard, it comes with a demographic profile. What can it be used for? It can be used to analyze your market share in more detail. So how much of a particular category are you actually getting? And optimize your seasonal mailing plans by stripping out the figures month by month or week by week. It can be used to do product extensions, to identify what your customers are doing in other categories. And people have also used it to evaluate business performance for mergers and acquisitions, because it is a quite detailed report. So one snippet on the market share trends is, if you look at these charts here, there's a bit missing here, but anyway. So you see at the bottom bubbles, you see actually the market share of that particular client we ran the report for in the category. So in 2012, the client had a market share of 14.47% in the competitive category, and the year after it was 15.34%. That is information that is normally really hard to get to when you want to compare yourself with the rest of the industry, and this report gives you a quick snippet of what your market share is. But there's more tables attached to it. This is just the visualization of the market share and what that competitive category is like in comparison with the Abacus Alliance as a whole. There's another table with more graphs, but in essence what it shows you, if I draw your attention to the right hand side, is that that particular client we ran the report for had 1.5 transactions per household in 2013, but that compared with the average transactions on the Abacus Alliance is which is 5.4. So there is a variance between the number of transactions that the actual client has on their file and what we see on the Abacus Alliance. And the bottom table shows the average transactions in the competitive category. So in the competitive category, there are more transactions per household than there are with the client, which could potentially lead to the client investigating, okay, why am I not having more subsequent purchases if my competitors have? This table is quite interesting in itself when it comes to market share and steering your seasonal activity. What I've highlighted here is the months of September and October, and just to go through the columns very quickly, it shows you the buying activity of the households that are on one of our clients' house files. It shows you the buying activities in the competitive category, and it also highlights whether there is a penetration gap between how active the households are with the client and how active the households are within the category. So just to point out those 2 months, September and October, because they have high penetration gaps, meaning that the activity in the category is higher than on the client's file, indicating that the client has a gap there, and that more can be done to close that gap. And the figures, the pound figures to the right-hand side, actually show the size of that gap. So the estimated competitive category sales, for instance, in the month of September, are £14 million. So that category in the month of September is worth £14 million, but the client does not quite obviously get the big part of the share. But any percentage point that could be increased in terms of market share is worth £142,000. So we see a penetration gap of 11%. If this particular client, through marketing activity, could only recoup 1 percentage point of market share, it would be £142,000 in their pocket. So that is to what detail we can go analyzing all that data. It obviously comes in a nice graph as well, just to see how the client revenue trends against the category. But another element of this report is to see what the customers are doing in other categories. So this was a young fashion client here, and their clients are highly active in the mid-market clothing category as well, and they do a bit in home interiors, and that could be used for product extensions. So if you're quite successful with selling, let's say, clothing, I stick to the old example with home interior, and you create a certain lifestyle around your clothing, and you know that your customers are already buying in the home interiors category, you might want to introduce home interiors products that follow the style of your clothing. And last, the demographic profile, which is something most of you probably have had before. The only difference is we're not only analyzing key variables such as age, household income, and presence of children. It will be put in relation to the Abacus Alliance. So you see, for instance, in an age band that, let's say here on the 55 to 59 age range, 11% are on the client's house file, whereas the Abacus Alliance as a whole in the same has 9.7%. So you can relate it to the overall kind of alliance volume, whether you have a certain bias to certain age bands that are not necessarily on the overall data. So yeah, just a few snippets here to show you how you can dig deeper from what starts with the annual trends report. And this particular client has found the report very useful, and I can just encourage you to not stop at a certain level, to dig deeper when you find, let's say, from the combination of your own revenue data with the annual trends data, you find that certain months are a little bit out of sync, you don't quite understand what's happening there. We can help you potentially to understand what's going on by looking at the data. Any questions?